In this podcast, we aim to uncover secrets, stories, and methods of those in the forefront of movement practices far and wide. From physical therapy, strength training, mobility training, CrossFit, martial arts, and much more. We want to use this platform to explore topics we love to talk about with other professionals in varying fields to do with movement. A little bit about us: we run Flow Motion Fitness as a personalized online mobility and rehabilitation coaching service. We offer an online course for coaches, as well as retreats and workshops in person. This podcast started when we began doing Instagram Lives, so the first few episodes are taken from our first lives that led us down the route of exploration in all topics related to the health and fitness of the human body that influences controlled and pain-free movement. Today's episode is taken from my very first and slightly awkward live that I did with Chelsea, where we answer a bunch of questions we got sent in about ankle sprains and foot health. I hope you guys enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoy chatting to each other. Hi! It worked!
How are you? We did it! How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Good, yeah.
How are things going? Do you have your matcha?
I do. I have tea. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, afternoon tea for you, morning tea for me.
Yeah.
There we go.
Cool. Lots of people. Hello.
Hi everyone. Welcome.
I literally don't know how to use this.
Cool. Yeah, we'll figure it out together.
Okay. Cool.
I see someone's in here. Hey Steven, that had us a question specifically about knee pain and how ankle sprains impact that. So you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So hold on a minute. I think I wrote a few of these down somewhere because we've got quite a lot of them.
Cool.
I'll just open up that file
while
real quick. What do you want to start with? Sorry?
Yeah, or I said I'll talk some about it while you find
Okay.
Well, you find that. Yeah, so this is something that I hear a lot when clients are like, hey, I sprained my ankle a long time ago, and then ever since I started having this problem, is it related? Yes, it is related. So ideally, I don't know, we talked about this some last time, but sort of like the joint by joint approach, and we want our ankles to be as mobile as possible, our hips to be as mobile as possible. If for some reason we lose mobility in either one of those two things, the knee can try to over-adapt around that and become a bit sort of relatively hypermobile and causing pain. So this is something that I see really frequently. I'm sure it's something you see all the time too. Big things to focus on are ankle mobility, hip mobility, and a lot of times those knee issues resolve themselves. Sometimes there's specific things needed, but what about you? What do you see with that a lot?
Yeah, it's rarely a knee joint problem. Like, it's not that common to have problems with that. It is quite common to have a lack of knee stability, and then issues coming from the ankle from there. But yeah, generally speaking, when it comes to knee issues coming from or coming after ankle sprains, it's usually something that you can address just by first of all, doing ankle mobility and hip mobility, but also just a tiny bit of knee stability, and that's usually fine.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of brings up a good point, and a lot of what we're going to go into today is like ankle sprains are quite significant, and you know, not that like they're not career ending or anything like that, but they are a significant injury, and a lot of times they get, I think in medicine especially, it gets like, oh, it's an ankle sprain, you know, like just wear a boot and then it'll go back to normal. It's like sometimes that happens, but it's very, very, very rare.
That's one thing I think I definitely want to go over with you today is like, what do you do when you first get an ankle sprain? Because obviously the traditional thing to do is to ice it and not move, but that's obviously not what both of us agree with.
Right, yeah, nor the research, right? Yeah, and I think we can start with that. Like icing, they found that icing, as you both know, but icing immediately after an injury can be detrimental. So a lot of people are told just go ice it, but icing is something that you actually want to introduce several days, 5, 6, 7 days after the injury. We think of inflammation as a really bad thing, but it's a natural process of our body. Our body produces this inflammation for a reason. We've got ligament tears too as a question. I'm gonna write that down.
I'm literally just going to write down some notes from this talk so that we can maybe put it up later. Someone just went compressing is important also. Not in the beginning, I would say, because that's a similar thing. You're actually restricting blood flow, and you actually want that blood flow there to do its job.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I'm typically a fan of as little compression as needed. I think if the person feels better with it and it allows them to move in a way that feels better to them temporarily, I'm open to it.
Yeah.
But in the most part, I tend to not recommend it. How about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know a lot of people sometimes have to because, say, they're doing like a basketball or something like that, and they don't want to go over on it while it's still recovering. But in the long term, that creates more problems. So in a way, if possible, I'd say don't do that sport until you're ready to use your ankle again properly, because really you're just going to be like solidifying the bad movement patterns that are coming from what you're kind of trying to go around what you can't use. And obviously you can re-tear it when you're
Yeah. And, you know, neurologically, when we have any sort of inflammation, sometimes our brain will say, oh, turn this muscle off, because particularly with the quad, it can happen with the ankle too. But so if you are an athlete and you're training and you have some active inflammation, that's when we want to be careful about returning back to sport and all that, just like you said.
Yeah. So that is a common, I'm just seeing that comment, icing and rest elevation are the first line. That is traditionally what you'd read about. But that's exactly the opposite of what we're suggesting.
Yes, yeah, that is what Google tells
and the research and the latest scientific research also actually backs this up. So, yeah.
We now know that icing immediately after is not the most beneficial. We want to wait, you know, 5, 6, 7 days, depending on the person. Active recovery is better than rest, or you can think of as relative rest as opposed to rest itself. So you do want to continue to move. You do want to continue to be active. You just want to be smart and have some guidance about exactly how quickly you're ramping that up and how you're putting that back in. You know, even if you are someone that had, you know, worst case scenario, you have some sort of fracture, I still recommend that people stay active. There are ways to work around it and ways to continue to train so that when you get out of the cast or the boot or whatever, you're a lot more primed and a lot less, you're going to have like a much smoother recovery than if you completely took that time off.
Yeah. And yesterday we briefly talked about what kind of movements that would, you know, entail. So obviously things like ankle cars in a lower range of motion than what you're usually used to is fine. As long as you're not pushing into pain, you're not going to re-tear anything or, you know, do anything silly there. Also moving the toes is important. So trying to just isolate the little toes, like the big toe, moving them around up and down on their own. And then dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, just trying to get some basic movement back in. Obviously, like sometimes you can't even walk on it. But a lot of that is fear. So you'll be surprised how many people can sprain their ankle and still actually do a lot of movement in comparison to what they thought they could do, because the second you do it, you're like, oh my God, this is so bad. Like I'm not gonna be able to walk for days. And you just don't move it out of fear that it, you know, it's so painful. But with a tiny bit of light movement, usually the pain slightly subsides, because that's essentially how pain works. That's the interesting thing about pain receptors.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it can be so counterintuitive to what we get taught traditionally that if you have pain, don't do it. And this isn't to say, you know, disclaimer on Instagram Live to push into pain.
Don't actually train.
Right. There are situations with people where working into discomfort can be beneficial. And when you have someone guiding you through that, like myself or like you, people tend to find that their recovery is a lot quicker than just taking 6 weeks off and then kind of trying to jump back into things.
There's very big differences in pain as well. So like a little bit of discomfort and tightness isn't a big deal. Something sharp and shooting, like, you know, don't push that. It's a big difference.
Exactly. Yeah. Typically what I tell my clients is like kind of keep it below a 4 out of a 10 on the intensity scale. And that's, you know, you got to make sure that nothing crazy is going on, like a fracture. So disclaimer, get evaluated. But I did see a question too about ligament tears, which I thought could be interesting to talk about for a sec, because this is something that I kind of hear a lot of misconceptions about. So with ligament tears in the ankle, there are 3 primary ligaments in the ankle that tend to get torn or sprained or affected when we have what we think of as like a traditional ankle sprain. And they have all these letters, ATFL, all these other letters. And a lot of times we as a natural process of aging, we tear them, or we start to tear them. And what can happen is when someone's having ankle pain, they go to have an x-ray or an MRI, and they're told, oh, the reason you're having this pain is because of these ligament tears that you're seeing. And then they'll get advised to take time off to let the ligaments, heal or that sort of thing. But a lot of times we can have these ligament tears and be asymptomatic. So I just like people to know if they've been told that that's why they're having pain. And it's been more than 6 to 8 weeks, so they're past some of that tissue healing time. There is a chance that it's not so important what's on the scan, but it's more about getting your mobility back and getting your movement back. And so seeing someone that specializes in movement is a really good place to start.
I'm just writing all this down so that we can post it later as notes for people.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still typing.
No, go for it. I'll answer a question. So let's see, but when the intensity is a little more, can't do any light movement. So I think they're saying like when the pain's more intense. So I would say if you're unable to do any light movement, that's where you wanna get checked out by someone, myself, Hallie, so they can guide you through that process. It's not to say that movement needs to be avoided by any means, but anytime pain is higher in intensity level, we just want to make sure that we're approaching it in a way that's custom to someone's body, their nervous system, their recovery. There's so many factors that can be played around with to get that intensity down so that person can start moving again.
Also, light movement's an interesting phrase because how light is light movement? Like I know a lot of people would consider cars light movement, but even just wiggling your toes could be what light movement. That's still, movement is anti-inflammatory. So if you're, first of all, allowing your body to have the inflammation, first of all, so you're not taking it away with the ice, then you're doing some light movement, you're basically promoting the blood to go to the right place to start doing the healing process. And, it's very rare that you can't even wiggle your toes. I mean, if you can't wiggle your toes, you've probably broken something pretty bad and you need to get that scanned. But if you can wiggle your toes, then that's something to start with if you can't even do little circles.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of times when we're working with pain, it's ultimately the nervous system, right? And so any sort of positive experience we can have with movement helps to tell our brain, to tell our body that we can ramp pain levels down a bit. So even if, things like walking around in the grass, walking outside, doing a yoga class, just any sort of movement that you can introduce that might seem unrelated to your original goal is actually related because it's teaching your body, for my voice, that area can move and it can be pain-free. And the more experiences you can have like that, the more your nervous system will start to downregulate the pain that you're getting.
Freeze gel. Things like freeze gel and heat gel, I mean, there's been studies proving that doesn't actually get deep into the layer of muscles. So technically speaking, it feels nice. And if it makes you feel better to move, then, I'm all for it. But scientifically speaking, it doesn't technically do what it says on the label. So that's kind of, the annoying thing about heat gels and ice gels.
Yeah.
What else do we have? I've lost the other questions I had. Oh, yeah, we had orthotics, didn't we?
Yeah. Cool.
You want to start?
Yeah. So I think orthotics are extremely overprescribed. And 99% of people can, I would say 100, but I just don't because I'm scientifically minded. So 99% of people can get out of them if they want. Since we know the entire body's interconnected, if we look at someone's having foot pain and we look at the foot and just treat the foot, we're missing so many other opportunities that we have to help that person. So a lot of people get told that they need orthotics, but what I find is once they start strengthening the foot, getting the ankle mobile, getting the hips supporting them well, they're able to come out of them no problem. So I think some of that depends on their preference about whether if they really like wearing them and they're super attached to them. I don't tend to push it a ton, but I find that most people feel better when they get out of them.
Yeah.
And it's less expensive.
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
I have heard of quite a lot of people actually having more problems down the line with them, or I've actually also heard of people getting different level shoes because they've been wrongly diagnosed with their hips being, I've seen a lot of that, and that sometimes that's, oh yeah, but I had a scan. It's like, but that might not be anything to do with the bone structure, but more to do with actually like your muscles. So if you haven't had your bones measured, then really you're most likely looking at something that's just tightness, because the amount of people I've met that have said, oh, I've been diagnosed with one leg longer than the other, and I check it with a basic test and it's never true. I've never actually met a single person yet. I know my cousin has it and she's had it scanned, but apart from that, in my whole life, I've not heard of anyone else having it. I think it's pretty rare. And if you're, having shoes that one's higher than the other, what do you think is going to happen to your hips?
Right, yeah. And a lot of times those lifts are just at the heel. So they put someone in a bit of plantar flexion all day, every day, which in itself can lead to some the ankle not feeling so good. And I think even, I've had some people reach out to me asking about leg length differences. I think even if someone does have one, they can learn how to train in a way to balance them out. Like there are very predictable changes that happen if someone does have a leg that's a bit longer than the other, and very predictable ways they navigate that. And you can learn how to, add a few extra mobility and strength and balance aspects to your training program to keep that really balanced for you, instead of just being told like, oh, let's put you have a leg length difference, and that being the end of the story. Like that doesn't have to be the end of the story. Like let's take it and
like generally speaking, humans are now being told that they're incapable of being human.
Yeah.
So like, oh, you need orthotics and you need this belt to support your spine and you need this and you need that and you need a chair. But it's like, what are all of these things doing to our ability to move? And if anything, it's reducing the amount that you're feeling safe to move. It's reducing the amount you will move. And the less variation you have and the more stuck you are, the more stuck you're going to get. Obviously, you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So that's the same with your ankle joint. Like if you're always in a trainer that has like a little heel on it, you're not wearing flat shoes or barefoot shoes, you don't have space for your toes to wiggle, you'll lose the ability to do that. And every time I assess someone, it's actually pretty rare when I see someone who can move their toes nowadays. Most people's toes are really stuck together. And then that starts moving the bones around. It stops you being able to react to the floor. But the more important thing is that actually goes up the chain into your hips and your spine. So if you can't feel the floor properly, and how are you supposed to react with the rest of the body?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point in a way. I think for people, I see heel spurs. I'm going to come to that in a second. For people that are listening or that are getting treatment and they're like, is this the best solution for me? Like, is the treatment that you're getting taking movement away from you, or is the treatment you're getting restoring more movement for you? Because like if an orthotic, or they'll even do things like put steel plates in shoes, or they'll have someone in a brace, or they'll say, don't squat anymore. Like, is your treatment taking movement away from you? And if it is, that's not a permanent solution, and you are, like, people can get permanent solutions that actually restore mobility and restore movement and progress them forward, as opposed to bringing this thing in that sort of feels better in the moment, but isn't going to give them the solution they want for, everybody just wants to be active and hike mountains when they're 60, right? That's what we're all trying to do. So.
I literally wrote that down. That was such a good point. Like, is your treatment taking you away from movement, or is it bringing you closer to more movement? And that's kind of a key. If any part of your treatment is reducing movement, I think it's safe to say it's not a good treatment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes short term, sure. Yeah. Like, but, if that's the long-term plan, like, oh, we'll just don't do this anymore. Like, no. Like, yeah.
I mean, with ankle sprains, it's pretty rare that you're going to need a boot. So it's not that likely. And
like hardly ever.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's like an avulsion fracture where a piece of the fibula pops off. Depends on who you ask, but like 90% of them. I've never worn a boot after an ankle sprain.
Mine was very recent. Like I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I don't know. I fell down a flight of stairs and I landed 3 stairs up on the side of my foot, which I've never trained before. I've never tried to land on the side of my foot from 3 stairs up.
Right, yeah.
So like my ankle was not prepared for that, but I do walk around and do steps on the side of my foot. So I could do 1, but not 3. And the way I fell on that, I was like, for sure, that's broken. The way it's, the sound of it, the snap and everything, I was like, that's broken. And within about 5 minutes, I was walking, it was moving around. It hurt, but you know, I think it would have been a lot worse. And the tear would have been a lot worse had I not already trained the muscle tissue to be able to take load in that angle. And that's like, yeah, I mean, I remember I used to go over my ankle all the time. I used to like walk and just go over on it, and that was it. For a week or two, I'd have a messed up ankle, and I still go over on my ankle. I mean, I'm clumsy, but nothing happens.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's a good point. Is that's something that I'll hear a lot is, well, I sprain my ankles all the time. I just have crappy ankles. And it's like, no, you don't have crappy ankles. It's just, let's teach you.
You could have crappy shoes. Shoes can make it worse.
Let's teach you how to get your ankle accustomed to moving in lots of different ways, so that, like you said, if that does happen, sometimes we fall off stairs and, you know, that sort of thing. But if someone is constantly feeling they're spraining all the time, there are things that they can do to help. I had a similar thing. We were like exploring a construction site in Nashville, which is like not smart to do, but I grew up on construction sites, so I do it. And I fell like probably let's see, it was probably like 6 feet down and landed on my ankles. Worst sprain I've ever had. But that's a lot of the reason why I get so passionate about talking about ankles, because I like went through the other side of the medical system and I was like, oh my God. Like everyone was telling me all the things that were wrong with me. Like, this is torn, you have a bulging disc, you have this, you know, but no one was ever actually like getting me back to and big box step ups, because that's all I wanted to do. So you can totally get back to doing all
that's the thing about the system. Like usually it's rest, try some ultrasound, don't move it. Let's not talk about exercise at all. It's not necessary. And that's the thing, is the one thing that's going to make you better at it. Hello, John.
I saw one about heel spurs. You want to talk about that one?
Okay.
So heel spurs, typically if someone tells me they have heel spurs, what I will think of is heel pain. Because without knowing for sure, you know, exactly what's causing it. A lot of people get diagnosed with heel spurs, but you can have referred pain into the heel from your soleus muscle, which is quite common. So if someone's having heel pain, I'll take that into context for sure, but I'll also take into context what's happening in the muscles in the heel cord, and also what's happening in their hips. Because if it is something that's referred from the soleus, then we start looking into, well, why is the soleus working so hard? And if they're having some limitations in hip extension, that's often a reason why that soleus will kick into overdrive. And so sometimes what I'll see is people get told they have heel spurs. It can actually be a more muscular thing. If it is heel spurs, that's fairly rare as far as what I've seen. What about you?
I haven't worked with it as much at all. In fact, I've never heard anyone say they had a heel spur.
Yeah.
I've heard of people having heel pain. I've had a lot of heel pain, I've never heard of anyone being diagnosed with heel spurs. Yeah. That's not something I've ever heard of yet.
Yeah, it's quite rare. Well, I'd be curious if it were heel pain, then that kind of takes me down a different path. And then if it were heel spurs, then we look into, you know, how do we get, you know, our heel basically, we think of it as just being a bone, but it's where our Achilles tendon goes and inserts in like really, really fine area in the back. So I'd be curious what was going on with the Achilles tendon and how we can get that moving to help bring in like some eccentrics into that area and calm that area down.
And quite like, frankly, that the whole lower leg area and the Achilles is actually not tested all that much. So like, for example, there's quite a lot of people that don't have enough range, first of all, in their dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. And they don't necessarily have enough strength to do like a deficit heel raise on one leg for 15 reps in a go. And if they can't do that, then it's questionable whether they should even be like, if say they can't do that and they're running on concrete, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. Yeah. So you're kind of asking for inflammation there.
And a lot of times typically with heel spurs, it's typically a runner. So then there's other things that person could look into is, I kind of save like running analysis typically for the very last thing. I find it's not needed too much if we work on like mechanics and other things first. But if someone's like a heel striker versus a forefoot striker, and there are ways that you could play with that to accommodate how much force is going through the heel, and work on keeping someone active that way too.
Yeah, usually looking at hips is important for this stuff. Yeah,
and you brought up a good point too with like the ankle is traditionally not something that is tested a ton, like you said, with like just sort of I don't know the right word for it, but more traditional movement assessment and medicine and all of that. So if you're someone that's having heel pain, low back pain, foot pain, ankle pain, hip pain, you just want someone that's looking at like the whole system. Because
that's another thing. Like if you've got something wrong with your lower legs, like there's no point of just looking at the lower legs. Like it's no way gonna be isolated in that case.
Right.
And one thing that like does happen a lot, because we all have specific type of shoes, is I have seen people like with talus bone issues where they've got pinching or it's a bit high up, and you know their dorsiflexion sucks. It's so common, and they want it fixed like really quickly. But the thing with the ankle, especially like say if the dorsiflexion is really far away and it's been that way for a long time, it's not going to be that quick.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if you wear the same shoes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes mobility, you know, if it's more nervous system based, we can see really quick changes in mobility really quickly. But if it is something that's been going on for a long time, sometimes these things take time.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, that's kind of true of most areas, but I'd say it's more complex with the ankles because you're on them all day. So it's kind of like they're constantly getting information. So obviously if you want to work on your shoulder mobility and you do a bunch of mobility sessions on your shoulders, you know, you're not going to be standing on your shoulders all day. So,
right. You want to talk about maybe like orthotics, and since we got a lot of questions about that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, all right. So I've worked with quite a lot of people with orthotics, and these are the people that are often like diagnosed with other things that seem quite serious, but when you look into it, is if you look into like joint mobility and joint testing, then you're like, oh, well, you know, there's quite a lot of things going over there, and it's probably just that. Because how can you say that you've got an issue with your SI joint, or you've got problems with your arches, or you're pronating too much, or whatever? How can you say that's a big problem if you haven't even checked your hip mobility? Like, if that hasn't been checked, then really that should be the last thing that you do. The first thing that you do should be getting a healthy range of motion in your hips and your spine and your shoulders and your knees and your ankles, and then you can start looking at other issues if, say, the problem hasn't resolved itself. But an interesting thing about scans is like, okay, you can get a diagnosis, but the fact is whatever's not working movement-wise and whatever's hurting, that is essentially what you need to work on. Once you start working on it mobility wise, it's, even if you do say have a herniated disc, the pain should no longer be there once you can move well.
Right.
So it's kind of like a backwards system in a way.
Yeah, I work the same way. Like if I'm seeing a client that has foot pain, we don't do anything with the foot in the first session most of the time. We're working on low back and hips, and then I want them to see like, oh, your pain changed when we worked on this. And so I think it's helpful for them because they get steps towards a solution, but it's also empowering to see, oh, it's not this thing that I was told that was wrong with me. Like I have ways that I can rehabilitate myself, and I have control over this. And but yeah, that's typically the last thing I look at too, especially with orthotics. I'm like, let's work on the hips, and then probably this is all I'm gonna tease out.
I mean, I generally say to people, let's try to get rid of those. Like, it's not going to help in the long term. It's going to cause, like, basically, if we work really hard on stuff and you're wearing orthotics, it's just going to slow down the process or even stop the process. Anyone who's wearing too tight shoes, wearing something that's got a massive arch on it so that your foot can't do its job, then that's a problem. I also do prefer if people use their feet at least some time without shoes. Even like barefoot shoes are great and everything, but they still, they still restrict your ability to move and feel. Just a touch. I mean, they're pretty perfect, but they're not perfect. They're as close to barefoot as you can get, but it's a completely different feeling walking in barefoot shoes on the ground than it is with no shoes on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And then you get all the fun benefits of grounding too, right? I know we both.
Yeah, that too. But yeah, like how many different movements so if you're walking on a rough terrain without shoes, how many different movements is your ankle doing? And then now if you think about, okay, we're modern humans, we've got pavements everywhere, completely flat, and we've got shoes that are so thick that on the heel we strike our heel down really hard instead of feeling the ground. So I think Kelly Starrett did a podcast on this like years ago about it takes about 3 days of barefoot walking and running before you stop planting your heel really hard and you start actually planting the foot completely differently, more as one. And you just start changing the way that you step, changing the way that you run, because obviously you don't have a big heel there protecting you from the ground. So you can't you realize that you really hit the ground hard and it shudders through your whole body because you've got that padding on your heel. But you take that away, you start moving your feet differently. And I mean, it's really hard to do any damage to your feet when you can feel the ground.
Right.
Like it's not possible. I think literally like 5 days ago, we were climbing up a mountain in Scotland and Callum took his shoes off. And he was climbing up this like muddy, rocky, like just rough terrain. And people were like staring at him like, this guy's not wearing shoes. But the thing is, like, you can feel everything.
Right.
And you can't hurt yourself. It's not possible. But imagine we trained like that more often with different, inclines, different movements with your feet without shoes. You'll learn how to use your feet again. We've basically unlearned how to use your feet. And there was another study actually about someone, God, I really don't remember I read this like maybe 5-6 years ago, but someone put their hand in a glove for 2 weeks and all the muscles in the forearm degraded and their ability to use the fingers. So if you think about that in terms of like, that's what we're doing to our feet. We're not using our toes. We're not capable of using our toes, most of us, not very well anyway. And then we're expecting the lower legs to function. It's like, well, if you put your hand in a glove for 2 weeks or a month or a year, why would you expect your forearm and your shoulder to function?
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect that to work very well. I mean, like a big, chunky glove. Like,
right. Yeah. That makes so much sense because it's like certain muscles in the lower leg, the plantaris, like that little, it's like this little thin wispy calf muscle that's, I mean, honestly, it's like, I don't even know. Like this thick, it's the tip of a pin. And I remember in anatomy, they're like, we don't really know what this muscle does, but it's here. And their thought was that it was a proprioceptive thing though. So that's a good point too, that there are a lot of muscles that that probably we don't tap into. That's so interesting. Yeah. And I think it brings up a good point too, of like, there's so much like shoe wear and orthotics. And I think it's important for people to remember that it's an industry. Like it's an industry and they want to sell things to people. They want to sell braces. They want to sell orthotics. They want to sell the fanciest shoes. They want to sell copper things that you can wrap around you to make you feel better. But our bodies inherently are so good at healing and so good at adapting. And if we can just learn how to tap into that, that's free. And I think it teaches people to be confident in their own abilities and not feel like they need this thing to, like you said, be human. I think
that's one of the worst things of this industry is like people think they need ultrasounds, they think they need scans, they think they need orthotics and special shoes for this. And like, for example, climbing shoes. Ouch.
Oh yeah, they hurt.
I mean, so bad. And we're allowed to use whatever shoes we want here as long as they're clean. So we tried it with our Vivos. Okay, so like, you can't like maybe, I'm not an expert climber, so obviously you will need those kind of shoes for some movements for sure. But it's not bad being able to feel what you're doing. Like, so quite often my foot would slip off if I had climbing shoes on, but with like barefoot shoes, you can feel everything and you don't slip. So it's just, I don't know, I'm experimenting with that, seeing how it goes. And same with barefoot running. People are like, I've read so many reviews saying, I got these barefoot shoes and I did a marathon and I was in agony. It's like, well, did you train to be in those shoes? Because you can't just buy a pair of shoes. So like, we're under the impression that you buy a pair of orthotics and the pain's gone, the boo-boo's gone, we don't have to worry about it, and the orthotics did their job. It's like, well, yeah, the orthotics took away the strain and the pain and made it easier for your body, which essentially in the long term makes those muscles weaker and lazier and worse at doing their job. But the opposite is true when you go into barefoot shoes. You put them on and then suddenly you have to work harder. So you have to break them in, you have to start training with them. And if you want to run in them, don't run in them straight away. Like, do a walk and then do like, I don't know, a few little jogs here and there. When I say jogs, I mean like 30 seconds.
Yeah, right.
Let your feet figure out what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a really good
and then
point.
gradually adapt it. I mean, it's the same with any training. You gradually adapt it. You don't just go straight away into doing a full-on CrossFit workout with, you know, high weights like the athletes use. You start light and you start with regressed exercises. It's the same with your feet, with shoes. Like, if you are in orthotics and you want to go barefoot, you're going to have to start training that slowly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because I think we know the differences that happen in those shoes, but it's, I know these things because I'm a nerd and I like to read about them. So, but if you just switch to barefoot running, I think for anyone listening, one of the important things are most shoes have something called a heel-toe differential, where the heel is actually elevated. So toes are down here, heel's up here, and that can vary between, you know, 0.2 inches to like 0.3 or 0.4 inches. So when you're running in a shoe like that, you will naturally be more of a heel striker. You also don't have to have as much dorsiflexion mobility. If you switch to a barefoot shoe, we've taken this heel-toe differential totally out. So now your heel cord has to stretch a ton more. So some of it's, the Achilles actually has to adapt to this new length that you're demanding from it. But also most people switch to a forefoot runner when they become a barefoot runner, which is asking even more of your Achilles, not in a bad way, but it's asking your Achilles to not only stretch more, but to work way more. So if you want to switch that, you totally can. It's just something that needs to be very gradual. I would recommend talking through it with someone so you have a really good understanding of what the changes are that's happening with your body, or maybe even go from like a heel-toe differential of 0.3 inches down to like 0.2 inches, and then down to 0.1 inches, and then go barefoot so that your body can adapt. I think barefoot running is great, but yeah, I think a lot of people read, what's the barefoot running book? And it's like, I'm going to be a barefoot runner, which is awesome. And, you know, let's do it gradually.
Yeah, gradually. That's the key with like all things biological. It has to be gradual. Like, you can't just force your body into something. I mean, you can, but it'll hurt. And there'll be side effects, and then it'll be harder to adapt. I had another question about plantar fasciitis.
Let's dive in.
Yeah,
I love talking about this.
I've heard so many people having chronic problems with this for years and years and years, and guess what? They're wearing orthotics.
Yeah. Oh, I love talking about this one because people aren't stuck with it. If anyone listening, you're not stuck with plantar fasciitis. It can get better. A lot of times, I don't know, I want to say all the time, a good amount of the time, it's not actually plantar fasciitis. It's referred pain from your calf, which is very easily solved. Sometimes it actually is plantar fasciitis. Either way, it can get better with movements and exercises and the appropriate strengthening and the appropriate loading strategies. Like you said, oftentimes, the plantar fascia will work really hard when we're not getting the support we need from our very tiny, awesome muscles in our feet that do all these little intricate movements. So if someone's, you know, in boots all day, or I'll tend to see this a lot if someone like works construction, so they're in really rigid shoes where their shoes can't adapt. or, maybe they're just in really highly supportive shoes that can make someone more susceptible to having it, like you were saying. So getting rid of the orthotics, even though it seems counterintuitive, can actually be quite helpful.
Like if you're a skier, for example.
Yeah, right.
After ski training, my feet were ridiculous. They just sucked. Like, because you're stuck in this boot all the time in one specific position. You kind of get stuck in this like strange lean as well. Like, you know how like the ski boots lean you forward and then you're just suddenly leaning like a weirdo, like just really strange stuff. It does some weird things to the legs for sure. And I had plantar fasciitis for a while.
Did you?
And it just came out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, okay, this is new. And it freaked me out because it's intense. But then I found, okay, well, my feet are really tight and really weak. And a few little exercises, obviously working on the feet quite a lot, as well as like the back of the lower legs and the front of the lower legs. And I did like this whole massive routine for it, like 2 or 3 times a week, and it was gone. And then I switched to barefoot shoes because I also used to wear normal trainers. And as much as I love Metcons for CrossFit, like they're not great shoes because they are really quite stiff on the heel. So they also have like this wall slidey thing. So like the heel is really quite hard. So sorry, they got this thing at the back so that you can do handstand push-ups on the wall. But because of that, it's got like this kind of ridge on the back of the shoe. And it means like if you're in them all day coaching, which I was, after a while, my feet started behaving a certain way. Yeah. So, yeah, that's when I realized, like, as great as the flat shoes are and they're wide and they give your toes lots of space, they're a good shoe. But if you're in them all day, and I mean, how many people are on their feet all day wearing some kind of trainers that are even more soft or even more padded? And then, they do some kind of exercise that's maybe out of the league of what their feet are capable of, and then they develop plantar fasciitis. So
right, yeah, and sometimes something I'll see is when someone is in shoes that are like a bit more like have a higher heel. Since they're relatively in plantar flexion all day, when they ask their body to go barefoot and stretch the heel cord out, the heel cord's like, no, we haven't done this, and so then that gastroc can reform down into the plantar fascia too.
And then just doing some really basic foot stretches and foot strengthening is excruciating when you're first doing it, because your foot's like, I haven't done this for months. This is why we have this problem.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point that I think is so helpful for people too, is like you used pain as information as opposed to it being necessarily a diagnosis. And I think that's something that's really prevalent in medicine now, is like pain means that there's something wrong with you, and because this thing is wrong with you, you have to stop this thing. But if we can zoom out, pain is ultimately it's information, and it's a signal from our body that like, hey, something's up, we need you to address something. But we can learn to listen to that signal and actually use it to our benefit to learn how to take care of our body. It doesn't necessarily have to be this bad thing that means we have to stop running or have to stop weightlifting. But we can use it as information. And I think the more that we learn to do that, the more we become in tune with our own body. I think our bodies are very intuitive, more than medicine teaches us that they are. So a lot of times I'll have clients who'll be like, well, it feels better when I do this stretch. I'm like, you just figured out.
I've heard that so many times. Someone's like, oh, I do this thing. And I'm like, that's exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Let's do more variations of that. And it's amazing how a lot of people actually know what they need. Obviously they're doing like a little stretch and it's not quite enough, but they're on the right track. They're getting there. Yeah.
And like, it's weird, but when I stretch my back, my foot feels better. I'm like, yeah, your body's pointing you to where, and I think, because what did we do hundreds of years ago? Like we probably did that, right? Like I think we were so much more in tune with our bodies, and we weren't on phones, and we weren't being told all these things.
We weren't stuck in one position wearing shoes.
Yeah, and we felt safe enough to like explore movement and to find the things that feel good. But I think people get bombarded with, it's bad, this is broken, you can't do this, that it robs people of that opportunity to, tap into what their body's very actually good at. See, question. Few basic exercises that would be for
exercises for the feet, or exercises, I'm guessing exercises for the feet and lower legs perhaps.
I think so. to do it. I'm happy to do a few of them. We can go through a few together. I'm keeping it.
I've got a sort of basic post ankle sprain stuff. I think we talked about wanting to go through this anyway.
Yeah. Do you want to do like some post about it, or do you want to?
Yeah, we could do it now, maybe.
Yeah, let's do it. We still have. I'm keeping it out of time because we ran out of time last time.
I don't actually know how we do that.
10 minutes.
All right.
I'll take them through ankle feet. Cool. I'll take them through some ankle cars.
Okay.
Does that work? And then you show something, or?
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think? Okay.
Yeah.
Bear with us. We're setting up. Okay. All right. So this is something that anytime we are not putting weight through the joint, unless there's a fracture, it's a very, very safe thing to do. So that's what I'm going to start with. And I'm just going to show you guys a couple movements that your ankles are capable of. Okay, so they can go in like this. That's called inversion. They can go out like this. That's called eversion. You'll see there's inherently a lot more of this. This motion's pretty small, but it's very important for your ankles. So something you can do is just grab the leg so that your leg's supported. We're trying to get from here up.
Oh, you've frozen. Don't know if this was frozen on my side. Are you guys frozen as well, or is it just me? Oh. See if we can get that back on. Sorry about this. 1 second. Yeah, frozen. Okay. Oh, how do I? There we go. That should come back up.
Hey, so sorry. I don't know what happened.
It just froze.
Weird. Instagram. Okay, I'll go through it really quickly and then pass it over to you. What did I end? Like inversion and eversion?
You were starting to do ankle cars, I think.
Oh, cool. Okay, so you're just trying to get the joint to move in all the different directions that it possibly can. And so you can go in like this. You can go up. You can go out to the side and down. And typically for most people, this outer portion is the more challenging one. It's very normal to feel all sorts of cramps and things happening as you're doing it. You can check the other side and try to get them to where they feel nice and even, and you have a lot of control in this outer range out here.
You're cool. I'm still here.
Cool.
All right. I don't know how I'm going to set this up, but in terms of feet, can you? Hold on. All right. So, thing that we can do is we can bring the big toe up, on, and we can bring the little toes up with bringing the big toe down. That's hard enough as it is. So that's a good test to do to see how much movement you have in your toes. You can also splay them. Probably should be doing one that's... So you can go out with your toes and actually start walking around, wiggling them out. Quite a lot of people who have... It is a lot harder than it looks.
It is really hard.
Have like one toe that just won't move, like the little toe, and then they realize it's actually kind of connected to the hip. So that's interesting as well, that you can get that. And then, okay, so basic ones for like when you've just hurt your ankle, you've got limited range of motion, like what Chelsea just shown, doing ankle cars is a fantastic first one to do. And then those toe things that I just showed you is a good thing to try. And then something as simple as just pointing, that seems really simple. But when you've just hurt your ankle, that is hard.
Oh, yeah. It's something, oh, go ahead.
No, go.
Something you reminded me of. I learned this because I know we've both worked with dancers in the past. From working with dancers who have to have crazy strength, is doing what you just did and adding toe movement to it. So if you curl the toes down as much as possible and then keep them curled as you flex the foot, and then continue to keep them curled as you come back up. And then you can make that tougher by putting little, little barriers on either side.
Just writing this down is genius.
Go either direction, and it makes it so much harder. So ideally, I would get like a bunch of books and put them right here, but because typically the foot will want to do a bunch of this while we were going, so you're just controlling and forcing it to go. So thank you to the ballerinas that taught me this one. This one's
That's really good.
cool. I like that one a lot. There was one other one that I thought of. Oh, another just like really easy thing for people. So they've done some research on strengthening the muscles in the insides and outsides of the calves, and standing balance is really helpful, really easy. So a little progression that people can do is just standing with one foot in front of the other, which seems like it would be easy, can actually be quite challenging. And then if that's easy, you can close your eyes. If that's easy, you can stand on one foot. If that's easy, you can close your eyes standing on one foot. And that is a really simple way to start training a lot of those muscles, and you can do that when you're like waiting in line at the grocery.
Yeah. There's also one more thing I'll just add quickly to it. Along those lines. So when you are first trying to get your knees and your ankles to kind of start moving again. So I'll just see if you can see me from here. Hi, Callum.
Hi.
So from here, I think you can see my foot. So you're just standing on an imaginary clock, and then you have a little bend in your knee, and you're just basically going to tap each number on the clock, so that your knee's moving around in different directions. But also, if you notice, if you focus on my ankle, it's going around in different directions as well. And I like this. It's like a fun game.
I like that.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Cool. All right. That's a few things, I suppose. I hope that's,
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Reach out with questions.
Cool. I think we've covered all the questions, really.
I think so.
I thought we'd go through that quicker, but
I don't think that's the case. I think all of our lives are an hour long.
Yeah, I know. Cool. Any other questions? I feel like that's it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, cool.
So we just talked about feet for an hour.
We did. Yeah, we could probably talk 4 more. Okay, cool. This was fun.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. Pick another topic. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Yeah, maybe we'll get off before it kicks us off.
Okay. Cool. Question: how do I save this so that people can rewatch it?
Oh yeah, when you close it, it'll say like, "Thanks so much for doing your live," and then you can save it or post now. I recommend posting now because saving an hour on your phone is like really hard.
I will do that.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Cool. This is awesome. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you too.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Have a nice day,
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Okay, I think I'm live. I've actually never done this before. So I'm just waiting for Chelsea to join. Everything should be fine for 2 o'clock. Hello. So, right. Now how do I add her?